When Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was at the height of its popularity, it was only natural for others to try to capitalize on its success. Much like the crappy cartoon copycats that came after the success of Ninja Turtles, we would see a little bit of a slew of crappy live-action hero shows, most of which were actually produced by Saban Entertainment, the same people who put Power Rangers on the map. However, there was one show that really did try to put its best foot forward, and that show was Superhuman Samurai Syber-Squad, and that is what we are going to be talking about today. So you clicked on this video and you're probably thinking, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Superhuman Samurai Syber-Squad? Better than Power Rangers? Or you're probably thinking, what the fuck is Superhuman Samurai Syber-Squad? Now ultimately this show wasn't as successful as Power Rangers, or otherwise we would still be talking about it 30 years later like we do Power Rangers. However though, there are a few things, a few areas where this show really did try to excel, and I would even go as far as to say that they did succeed in areas, and we're going to be talking about those today. So here are a few examples as to how Superhuman Samurai Syber-Squad was actually better than Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Now you might not think this is important, but staying close to your source material does help, especially when you're Frankensteining Japanese footage with American footage. Much like how Power Rangers was adapted from Koiru Sentai Zyuranger in Japan, Superhuman Samurai Syber-Squad was adapted from a show called Denku Chojin Gridman. Its English translation is Gridman the Hyper Agent. Power Rangers versus Zyuranger, there were some vast differences between them. Instead of 5 teenagers with attitude, they were 5 ancient warriors who were sleeping in a hyperbaric sleep, awaiting for the day for evil Bandora, aka Rita Repulsa, to wake up. Now, I'm not going to get too much into Zyuranger, but some of the differences was that it was darker, the Green Ranger fucking died. I mean, it was a much different show in many ways. Now, there weren't very much differences between Superhuman Samurai Syber-Squad, which I'm going to be calling Quad S going forward just because it's a mouthful to say, versus Gridman. They were both about a group of teenagers that hang out in the basement with their computer, and they enter a computer world and fight kaiju that is literally attacking computers, more or less hacking them by physically attacking the circuitry on the inside. Now, aesthetically, there were some differences between the shows. For example, the main character didn't merge with the Gridman character. He just became him and entered the world. Also, his friends entered the computer world with him and would pilot the assist vehicles. Whereas in the Japanese version, the main character's friends would pilot the vehicles through video game controllers here in the real world. The main villain was basically identical, aside from their names, Khan Daigerfer in the Japanese version, Kilo Khan in the American version. They both enlisted the help of a outcasted emo kid to create the kaiju for him. The only difference between these two characters was that the Japanese version had a lot more character depth and resolution towards the end of the show, where in the American version he was just pretty one-dimensional, and that was it. Now, the reason why I brought up staying close to the source material first is because it helps with this bigger part, and that it was the production value of the show. When you compared Mighty Morphin Power Rangers to Quad S, there was a vast difference in the cinematography and just the overall quality. Now, Quad S was brought to us by Dick Entertainment, who worked in collaboration with Subaraya Studios and Ultracom Studios. Those same studios were also behind Ultraman. At the time in Japan, Ultraman was a bit of a bigger deal compared to Super Sentai, which is essentially what Power Rangers is, and therefore it got a bigger budget. When you watched Power Rangers, you felt like you were watching a Frankenstein show. You felt like you were watching American cinematography that looked akin to basically an after-school special from the late 80s, spliced with Godzilla footage from 1975. When you watched Quad S, it was kind of actually hard to distinguish the Japanese footage from the American footage. And because they fought in a computer world, it would make sense to see Japanese citizens getting attacked from time to time, because that show also took computer attacks to other parts of the world, London, the US. Ultimately, that led to better consistency. Now, one of the biggest hooks of both Gridman and Quad S was that they did fight in a computer world. So the actors didn't even have to get into any real costumes or anything for their hero parts. You didn't have to worry about a real world setting, you didn't have to worry about a city, and you didn't have to worry about setting your fights up in one of the many illustrious rock quarries that California had to offer, like in Power Rangers. And also, too, because the heroes in Gridman were always in costume as well as the villains, the dubbing factor was non-existent. I mean, with Power Rangers, it was apparent that they took some footage from something else and dubbed over it in English, and that's fine. I'm not spoiled. That doesn't bother me. But still, that was another obstacle that the Quad S show did not have to worry about jumping over. Now, another area where the show was better was that it wasn't afraid to take risks and put people in real danger. For example, Kilo Khan would send a kaiju to attack a computer system that is responsible for a hospital, or water pressure, or gas. And we have seen episodes where those threats, economic threats, there were times where in Power Rangers the stakes didn't seem real enough. I mean, when the Dragon Zord was bad, how many times can it bite through the same smokestack at that one fucking factory? I mean, let's be honest. After a while, it does wear thin. And for as much as you think monsters attacking a city would be a greater threat than attacking computer systems, at least in the Quad S show, it showed the results of what happens when you attack these computer systems and put people in real peril, which was something we never got to see in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So I really appreciated that about this show, because your heroes are only as strong as their threats. Now, if there's one area where this show really put its best foot forward, as I had said before, it's with the casting decisions. Now, for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, it was a cast of unknowns. Granted, we would eventually grow to love the cast of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and rightfully so. But when Dick Entertainment put Superhuman Samurai Syber-Squad in the arena of live-action hero shows, they did really well with the casting choice. The main character, Sam Collins, was portrayed by Matthew Lawrence. At the time, the Lawrence brothers were pretty popular. Now, this was before their sitcom, and I do believe he eventually left the show to go do the sitcom, and that makes sense. But the fact is that we got a lead that we all recognized right off the bat. Second to that was Troy Slayton, who played the bass player Amp. Now, a good chunk of you might not know who this person is, but if you were alive and watching TV in the early 90s, you might recognize him from Parker Lewis Can't Lose, in which he played Jerry Steiner throughout the tenure of that show. And last but not least, the main villain of the show, Kilo Khan, which, by the way, in both iterations of the show, the Japanese and the American version, he was just pretty much seen on a TV screen the whole time. Easy peasy, right? So all you really needed was a voice actor, and they were very wise in their decision, in which they had gotten Tim Curry to do the voice for Kilo Khan. Tim fucking Curry. So you have to imagine that if this show wanted to try to do something, adding prestige like that to me was a big deal, considering how those other shitty live-action hero shows really didn't have much to offer in that vein in terms of recognizable talent. In the end, Superhuman Samurai Syber-Squad would eventually just fall into the way of obscurity, to now where I don't think there's even a streaming service that views it. I don't think they've had a DVD put out or anything. Gridman the Hyper Agent, on the other hand, we've seen Blu-ray releases. I actually own a copy myself. Their merchandise is still rolling out, and they've made anime shows that continue from it. Ultimately, Quad S would fail in the grand scheme of things, and I don't want to say it was a failure, but it was short-lived. It was just too short-lived, and it wasn't going to be longer-lived, because Gridman only had one season with 39 episodes, whereas Superhuman Samurai Syber-Squad managed to stretch out 51 episodes. In some cases, they would just reuse footage of the same monster and literally say, we're going to send this monster after this computer again, even though it was defeated once before. So they really tried to stretch out what they had. There were plans for a second season for Gridman, in which they were even going to introduce a second Gridman called Gridman Sigma. Unfortunately, that never saw the light of day until many years later, in which we would get a short animation from Tsuburaya Studios. And even the new anime pays homage by calling the shows Quad S Gridman and Quad S Dynazenon. So they at least are showing their respect for the impact it had here in the States. So while Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, much like their logo, truly was capturing lightning in a bottle, Superhuman Samurai Syber-Squad did leave a good impression on me. And that's not to say that the other copycat shows did not try, and some of them I actually did enjoy. But this is the one that I felt was the best out of the success that could have came out of Power Rangers. However, I will admit the theme song was fucking awful. I will tell you that while it won't be soon, I will be doing a counterpoint video, because I'm a fucking dork and I enjoy talking about this kind of stuff. And if you enjoy videos like this and you want to see more of them, you know what to do.